Good day, listeners. It's your man, Dame DNYDC, host of the Two Mics Up podcast. And we are here today with a amazing story. We were had the privilege of having today's guest on. We're closing out Black History Month and thought this woman would be a great example of Black history. What she is doing here in Virginia is really historic. I like to think of as history in the making that we're having the pleasure of watching transpire right before our eyes. And I'm just so excited that, you know, her people and I were able to work this out. And Lise, I cannot tell you, I met her once. And she probably doesn't even remember. This was in our infancy, but had the pleasure of meeting her once, and I was pleasantly surprised. Didn't really know much about her. I know she's from my backyard, up in Woodbridge, but had to do a little more digging. And I'm glad we have her here today. But I think you've met her once or twice, maybe more than that. I think, Lise, correct?
Yes, I have. I have met Miss Jennifer Carroll Foy. Oh, on several passing occasions. And it was so intriguing to me because I was like, who is this woman? And what is she? Because she's talking my language, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I'm like, okay, let me do a little digging. And my cousin, Kim Cummings, she definitely informed me. And then I went hard and Delegate Joshua Cole, who's my delegate. And I was like, okay. So I had the pleasure of sitting in on the special assembly.
Mm.
And when Miss Carol Foy was speaking, I was like, okay, now, because it was like, okay, this is what we need
Mm.
in Virginia. So I did have the pleasure, and we did have a brief encounter up in Prince William where she did graciously give
Yeah,
us some time on Two Mics Up when we were out in the field.
sure did. So without further ado, because I'm not going to even keep talking, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to today's guest, Jennifer Carroll Foy. Jennifer, I'm going to please introduce yourself and let our listeners know, who you are, what you're about, and what history are you in the process of making this year here in Virginia.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you so much for having me. It is always exciting to be here with you all. And I am Jennifer Carroll Foy, and I'm running for governor in Virginia. And when I win, I will be the first Black woman governor in the history of our country.
All
So
right.
that's the Black history that we're making here in Virginia. And so I'm excited. I'm excited because now we have an opportunity to have a working mom represent working families. The wealthy and well-connected have had a lot of representation in Richmond, but what about the communities that have been ignored, neglected, and left behind?
Mhm.
Too many Virginians are working 40 hours a week, bringing home $14,000 a year. We are not seeing that safety net that so many families need to make it successfully out of COVID. And we see the disparate impact on Brown, Black, and other marginalized communities. But let's be clear, this didn't start because of COVID. It started a long time ago because
Mhm.
of the inequities in our healthcare, in our education, in our economy, in our environment. And that's why we need a real leader who's right for this moment, who's going to address those inequities in a real way, who's not going to give us lip service or false promises, because you can't feed your family on that. You can't pay your rent and your mortgage on that. And so why is it that is so many schools in Virginia just as segregated, unfunded now as they were in the 60s? So that says that a lot of, the status quo is broken, and that's not what's going to work. So we don't get change by electing the same old policies and politicians of the past. We get change by electing a new leader with a clear vision and bold ideas on how to move us forward. And that is exactly why I'm here and why I'm running for governor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
All
speechless.
right,
All
Miss
right. Yeah.
Foy.
Okay. I'm speechless. All right, I'm going to lean back on that one. All right.
Well, if we had to just vote on that intro, you got me. But
Exactly.
I know that you are a native of Virginia. You are from Virginia. You're from Petersburg, Virginia. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. From
And
the
how was,
first.
yeah. So how did that shape you? How was growing up in Petersburg?
hmm So, growing up in Petersburg, and for those of you on the call who don't know, I can say that Petersburg has one of the highest child poverty rates, rates of unaccredited schools, and was named one of the most dangerous places to live per capita in all of Virginia. And that's where I'm from. But
Wow.
luckily, I was raised by my grandparents, especially my grandmother, Mary Lee, a Southern Christian woman who had me in church several days a week, who taught me the values that I hold true. And so she always said things like, if you have it, you have to give it. Right. And so even though she didn't have much, I watched as my grandmother gave all she had. She was volunteering in her community. She worked at Central State Mental Health Hospital. Even people who from the church who fell on hard times would come live with us until they got back on their feet. So
Okay.
I'll never forget at a young age, my grandmother had a stroke and became a quadriplegic.
Wow.
And having to sit at my dining room table with my aunt, trying to decide if we're going to pay for our mortgage that month or for the medications keeping my grandmother alive.
Wow.
Mhm. So
Wow.
that I like to say is the moment that my journey for governor began.
Wow.
Wow. So listening to your background and that struggle, how did you press on? How did you overcome those type of challenges?
So one of the things that being from a place like Petersburg teaches you is resourcefulness and resilience. That
Mhm.
no one is going to look out for you. You have to look out for yourself. You know, things that my grandparents taught me. My grandfather said, if you start something, you better finish it. Right. You know, so all of those type of things instilled a willpower in me, a grit, a fortitude that I was able to then translate to go to Virginia Military Institute and become one of the first women to ever graduate from one of the top military colleges in this country. That taught me that service of putting, you know, service above self. I would do that by being a public defender, representing people 100% below the poverty line, people with mental illness and substance abuse, people who look like you and I, right? Where the criminal justice system works one way for the wealthy and well connected, but another way for Black, Brown, and other marginalized communities. To be a foster mom, helping kids who have been abused, traumatized, and neglected, to be a community organizer. So that's the difference. Some people talk about it, I lived it. And I have dedicated my entire life to service and fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. And we're going to need a fighter if we're really talking about bouncing back from this COVID-19 and this pandemic and this global recession that we're facing.
Well, that's true. I do believe that we do need a certain type of person to lead us in Virginia and throughout the United States. It's time for a fresh, new perspective because business as usual, I feel, is not working. And being that the challenge of graduating from a military school, right, as a woman, as an African American woman, what was that like? Because I feel like you have to be a certain type of person to do that anyway. And then the challenge of being a person of color and a woman. So how was that?
Yeah, so let me tell you, going from Petersburg, which is majority all Black, to, you know, Virginia Military Institute that has its roots deeply embedded in the Confederacy. You know, never have I seen some of the things I saw, never have I experienced the things that I've experienced, never have been called some of the names I was called. So it's just kind of going to and through those two things, you know, was stark. But I always say that a maturation happened for me at VMI. A part of myself I left there
Mm.
because I had to grow up very quickly and see how the world operated, how the world saw me. That when I walk into rooms, I'm automatically charged with making people feel comfortable and working against stereotypes. You know, like even when people say things like "she's so articulate," people fail to understand that that's not a compliment.
No.
Right? What am I supposed to sound like? And so
Right.
having these type of encounters and understanding that I have to be, like my grandma taught me, you know, twice as prepared to get half as far, right?
Mhm.
Work twice as hard to get what everyone else is already getting. I mean, it's just all of those things I learned and it taught me how to be, you know, how to be how to have resourcefulness and resilience and have that grit and determination and fortitude. So even as a legislator, it helped me
Mm.
passing my bills in a bipartisan fashion, not caring if you have a DI or R beside your name. The goal is to get the job done, to plan and execute, to accomplish the mission. So focusing on that and then focusing on like bringing my community with me. That's
Mm.
why, you know, I was down in Petersburg yesterday, you know, reminding people this is where I'm come from. Look at the streets. These are the streets I walked. see these blighted, abandoned buildings? That's, those are where my friends, lived. And these schools that's not accredited, we only have one accredited school in the entire city. That's where I went to school. So helping to uplift this narrative, because it's not about me, it's about us. And it's about our communities that have been ignored, neglected, and left behind for too long. So I want people to know I'm not just running for governor. We are running for governor because I'm going to bring my entire community with me.
Well, that's
Okay.
it's very well said. And I just have that because there were a couple of things in listening that really caught my ear. And one is service. And I think you're probably the second person that, no, we've been blessed to have, we had Qasim Rashid on when he was running. And he helped really change my opinion in two things. So service, your service, how do you feel or how do you see yourself? When you say we, are running for governor, what in that point of service that you talk so highly about, what can you do to show us or really make our community feel like you are here to serve us and in turn help us help work together with you to support you in your platform?
Absolutely. So I can say that, one of the frustrating things is that when I talk to young people, especially, and they say, I don't vote or I don't do politics or, my vote doesn't count. And I'm like, that pothole you hit on your way to this barbershop, that's politics. This job you work making $8 an hour, that's politics, right? You having or had to go to school where you didn't have books to take home to do homework, that's politics. Politics is everything around you. And so if you don't like something, you can continue to complain, or like in the words of my grandmother, what are you going to do about it? Right? Your do has to be vote. It has to be vote people who are not looking out for the people who need the most help, the most vulnerable amongst us, uplifting those communities. Because I can tell you people in Petersburg, Portsmouth, and Pulaski are not feeling like, oh, the GDP and the stock market is rising and everyone is doing well. They're not feeling that. Right. And so when I say we and us, it's about, all the communities who have, not been able to reach that middle class, make family sustaining wages, work one job, put food on the table, send their kids to safe, well-funded schools. They're sitting in traffic for 2 hours going 20 miles. All of these communities, right? All of the issues that we've had for the past several decades that have not been addressed. I'm bringing all of us, with me, to the governor's mansion, because you will always be on my mind with every decision I make, every bill and budget I pass, because that's what happens when you have, a person who's not a corporate lobbyist or, a 42-year, multimillionaire politician.
Right.
You don't have to empathize. I understand, because I've gone without health care. I have worked minimum wage jobs. I felt the pain of being hungry. So I move with a different type of energy and with a different sense of urgency than other individuals. So that's what it means. It means when you look at your family, I'm looking at your family, and I'm fighting for them just as hard as you are.
Okay, that's and again, I'm not sitting here trying to get anyone or any listener to sway one way or the other. Personally, for me, that's something that I needed to hear. And I'm going to ask the second part of my second question that really stood out to me. You mentioned bipartisanship. Now, for me, um, I think bipartisanship is trash. I think it's a code word that we've gotten comfortable using and throwing around because I don't think bipartisanship works. You mentioned, working together, whether you have an R or a D before your name or after your name. Again, I'm only talking about me. I'm not trying to sway anybody. But how do you think you're going to be able to get that to work? Because what I've seen over the last couple of administrations, that doesn't work. So how do you see yourself making that change or that pivot?
So one of the ways that I saw that was most significant was with Governor Northam. He is our Democratic governor. And when he was first elected, we still had a majority Republican General Assembly. But because of two things, the respect and relationships he had built, the Republicans were willing to give him Medicaid expansion. Now, it did have a lot to do with self-preservation, let's be clear, because they almost lost 15 seats in the majority in the General Assembly. So a lot had to do with that also. But at the end of the day, they could have dug in their heels. And I could tell you that if they had a divisive governor leading, they would not have made that an opportunity. They would have found a workaround. They would have done something different. I could tell you that as a freshman, the Republican speaker put me on courts of justice, which is a very notable committee to be on. Oftentimes you're not put on there. I mean, I know some legislators who are attorneys who've been fighting for almost a decade to be on courts of justice. I was able to pass bills while in the minority, substantive bills in the minority, almost just as many as I did in the majority. And it's because, for me, I try to find ways we can work together, because I identify the fact that Republicans represent millions of people just like I do. And a lot of the things that I fight for helps the people who come from their communities. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people who won't vote for me, right? My working families earn income tax credit, making that refundable. It don't necessarily help only people who live in Black and brown communities. It really helps the people in Southwestern rural Virginia who make $20,000 or less and file taxes, right? And so I've had people, come up to me and say, Jen, you're fighting for, unions, and you're fighting for, this working families refundable earned income tax credit. You're fighting for these things that for people who oftentimes will not vote for you. That's not the charge. My charge is to uplift everyone, right? There is no caveat. I have to ensure that everyone wins. I won't only be the Democratic governor, I'll be everyone's governor. So I have to bring them along. Whether you voted for me or not, I am still here to protect you and your family and improve your quality of life. Because at some point, people will understand that I'm just principled and I'm just trying to do the right thing. So if I can bring Republicans and independents along, I will. But let me be clear, I will never negotiate my values, right? And if we cannot work in a bipartisan fashion, then I will move forward. I made a very clear statement when I was fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. I stood up and I said, listen, Republicans specifically, there's some things we can disagree about, right? Education funding, transportation. But when we're talking about women's equality, I will not be moved. So if I can't change your mind on women's equality, then I promise you this, I will change your seat. So that is how I operate.
Well, I will give you kudos. And I'm not saying it to be funny. Your clear explanation for me is very clear. You are here to serve the people. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle they sit on. And I appreciate that, because I think we need more of that. And I support you 200% in the sense of your values at your core. That's who you are. And those things should never be moved, and they should never be compromised. And to me, that just shows me how much of a value as an individual you are, the person that you are, the genuine article. And I think that's what a lot of us as people of color really need to start looking at. Stop looking at the D or the R or the I. Look at the individual. Look at the genuine article. What is that person's value going to be? And you hit it, because a lot of times what we talk about on this platform, I do understand, we're doing a lot of things for the Black community, but our community is not totally and solely Black. What we bring is really for everyone in the community. And I really enjoy hearing what you just said, because everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, you have a person in Jennifer Carroll Foy that I think can be on the verge of doing great things here. But I'm not here to sway anybody.
Well, you're doing a good job, bro. I mean, you hired in this boy,
not here to sway anybody. Just saying. She opened up my ears and my thought process. So,
okay.
I just want to share that. But if listeners, if y'all haven't been and you're just tuning in, we're here today with a very special guest. We're talking about history in the making with Jennifer Carroll Foy. She's running for governor here in Virginia. This woman has really enlightened me and changed some of my personal opinions. But we're going to dive right into the second set of questions with, you mentioned also a lot of our listeners may not know your background and your history. You talked about VMI and what that was like, coming out of military school. And then you transitioned into becoming a public defender. Talk to us, like, why did you decide to become a public defender? Like, what was that narrative all about?
Yeah, so let me be clear. My family definitely wanted me to work at White Shoe Law Firm and go make some real money, right? They keep saying I'm nothing but a social worker with a law degree. But this is what I live for, it's what I enjoy. So after I got my law degree, I actually did some civil litigation work. I was a magistrate judicial officer, actually, or otherwise known as a magistrate judge. So law enforcement officers would come to me for arrest warrants and search warrants and bond hearings. So what I realized very quickly, because I was working in Richmond at the time, that, we have a two-tier criminal justice system here in Virginia. We have one that works well for the well-connected and the wealthy, and one works very differently for Black, brown, and marginalized communities. In Virginia, you are more likely to be in jail pre-trial. That means without having been found guilty of anything, and be there for weeks or months at a time, if you are Black, innocent, and poor, than if you're white, wealthy, and guilty. We have
Wow.
a justice for profit system here in Virginia, and it's problematic, and it's single-handedly contributed the most to mass incarceration. So I looked and I said, you know what, I can continue to do this and be a part of the issue, or I can become a public defender and be a part of the solution, because everyone deserves zealous, competent representation. And my goal is to have, like I tell my clients, I don't ever want to see you again. My job is for you to never come back. And so not treating them as just a client or a number, but figuring out, how did you get here? Okay, you have a mental illness, so we need to get you connected with medications and services. You have a substance abuse issue, then we need to get you into some type of treatment program and find some type of inpatient program to get you services so you can stop stealing to feed your habit. Because we fail to realize here in Virginia, we can't incarcerate ourselves out of addiction, right? It's a mental health issue. So, all of those type of things. I mean, I could tell you, one of the saddest things I had to do was, I had a 12-year-old boy when I was in Arlington, and he walked into a store, put on a coat, and walked out. It was snow on the ground. Come to find out, dad was in jail, mom was nowhere to be found. And I looked at him and asked him, well, what happened? What'd you do? And he said, I was cold and I didn't know what else to do. But when I at his home, he had no electricity. There was no one there to be found. So should he really be a convicted felon? Because that quote at that time was over $200. Wow. I mean, think about it. The systems have failed him. His parents have failed him. Schools have failed him. Society has failed him, right? And now we're going to label him a convicted felon as if we're really going to give him a jump start on life. So, I mean, I can't say that I would do anything different. So that's what it's about. It's about having people who understand, the errors in our laws and our practices and our policies that need to change. So we are not continuing this generational poverty and cyclical door of people coming in and out of the criminal justice system where some people have been profiting. That ends, and that ends under Carroll Foy administration. So that's why, I went from doing that to doing this. I always want to be a part of the solution. I always want to bring my voice and to fight and to advocate for those who can't fight and advocate for themselves. And that will just lend itself to me now running for governor.
Before you go, before you ask, but there was something that I don't know why, and I don't know if Jennifer can answer. Dealing in law as a public defender, Virginia has a lot of antiquated laws. I mean, our country has antiquated laws. Is there a way, or as a citizen, I just wonder, just listening to you, how do we reverse those antiquated laws or get them removed from the books? Because a lot of times they use those against people in the Black and brown community. And, is there a way maybe you can kind of educate us on that? Like, is there steps or things that we as citizens can do to, whether it be writing in, some type of petition or things like that, to get our public defenders and attorneys and lawyers to move on changing some of these laws?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a wonderful question. What we do is that, yes, we advocate for our legislators who are down there, passing good bills and hopefully killing bad ones, to find those places in the law that's rooted in Jim Crow and the residuals of, Black codes, and get them out. Right. And so minimum wage is one of those things. Like, typically, a lot of the jobs that were held by majority Black people were paid the least and weren't included when you're talking about, elevating the minimum wage. So that's why, like, restaurant workers, tip workers and things like that, that's your bellhops and your restaurant workers and all of that. Those are the residuals of Jim Crow. So that's why we have to have a true minimum wage bill that brings everyone along: domestic workers, food service workers, restaurant workers, everybody. And so that's what has to happen. And like right now, we don't have a real $15 minimum wage bill. We have a bill that gets us to $15 in 2026, which Exactly. It's not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
We need $15 now. It's tied to the index. So as inflation goes up, our wages go up.
Correct.
That's what needs to happen. So we just need people to lean on these legislators, hold their feet, to the fire, hold them accountable. Like, our families are hurting. Why are we being asked to raise families off $11 an hour, $10 an hour? It just cannot be done, especially in Northern Virginia. So yes, that is the way to do it. And then put a person in the governor's seat, an executive position, who knows what that's like, because she's worked in a minimum wage job and she is committed to making sure no one else has to go around making $7.25 an hour.
Yeah, that whole story about the 12-year-old just has me feeling some kind of way, because is this the situation with just blanket sentencing and blanket charging? We don't see the history or the background. It doesn't matter why you went and got a coat. We just know that you stole a $200 coat. So at 12, you become a felon. Is there some way that can just, like, I guess because the public defender office is so starved, they don't have the tenacity or the heart that you have, and understanding of the greater good, like we need to find that. So is there a way that we can change the way that the public defender's office is funded, so they can have just a surplus just as much as the prosecution? Because they seem to have a surplus of money and resources, where the public defender's office seems to me, in my opinion and my experience, a little starved and a little overwhelmed and underfunded.
Listen, you are speaking to the choir right here. Some of the public defenders, they're like, oh my gosh, I want to vote for her. You are speaking nothing but facts. And that's absolutely true. With this false tough on crime narrative, so many legislators in the past have been willing, and so many localities have been willing to throw so much money at the prosecutors, but then starve the public defenders. But they don't understand, our job is to hold the state accountable. It's to ensure that people's constitutional rights are being protected. My job is just as important, if not more, than the prosecutor, because I have a heavier lift. Because my job is to ensure that this person never comes back, that their needs are being met, that fairness, justice, and equality happens in the courtroom when the laws and oftentimes the judges and the prosecutors are stacked against them. So it is more work to do what we're doing. And we are definitely not paid anywhere in parity with the prosecutors. So I'm excited to say, like, entities like Justice Forward, they're fighting to ensure that public defenders' offices are funded on an equity scale as prosecutor offices are. So we can continue to attack the retrain and retain top talented lawyers who are going to continue to zealously and competently represent, people in our communities. So I'm proud to say I passed a bill to put a public defender's office in Prince William County, the majority minority county, second most populous county in the Commonwealth, and we didn't have a public defender's office. And it's one that's going to be funded well. We're going to have a sentencing advocate, we're going to have an investigator, we're going to have all of these things that people need in order to have their case represented well, and then to ensure that people who have other supplemental needs, those needs are met. So it's as simple as, a person is on SSI or disability, getting that application in before they're released from jail, so they have a check waiting on them when they get out. So we're not just sending them out on the streets, right? Things like that have to happen. I mean, you got to set our returning citizens up for success and not failure if you don't want to see them again.
That's true. That is true. And that was good. I hope that that concept can sweep through the state and through the nation eventually, because that is a good concept. If we give a fair playing field, because if you're poor and you can't afford this, like you said before, you're sitting in jail, not because you're guilty, it's just because you're poor, So that I'm for that fight
all day long. I'm with you.
All right.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so well, anyway, moving forward, Ms. Foy, because it seemed like we could talk to you forever. I just love it.
Exactly. I know you blacked out for a minute, because that was a personal question. So go ahead. I saw you black out for a minute. Go ahead.
I'm like, let me stick to the question. Let me regroup. I digress.
No, go ahead. I mean,
I just feel like it's so relatable. And unfortunately, in these times, we always get these textbook answers, these robot, answers, and we don't relate to our candidates. And it goes back to the younger people telling you, I'm not into politics, I don't vote, because we're so turned off by years of career politicians that just do not have that touch, that like deaf tone to the community, you know, tone deaf, excuse me, to the community. So I'm just off on a tingy, but anyway, go ahead, Dane.
No, yeah, no. So I'm with you. And I think this. I thank her for joining us on this platform.
Yeah.
We get to see her in it. Not to say you're not Jennifer Carroll Foy, but as Jennifer, not you are running for governor, but to see you as a person, we have lost a lot of sight and touch on that, and this platform hopefully will bring light to that. It has for me. I'm just going to be honest. I was kind of like what Lisa said initially, feeling like, we might be going down that cookie cutter road, but I'm glad that you're open, you're candid. I love your smile. I love your energy. Your banter with us. So I'm just going to jump in. You're currently on this historic run, and talk to our listeners if you could about your platform. Like, what is Jennifer's full platform, or what can they expect from you moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, what I tell people is don't listen to the rhetoric, check the record. And so, what I am going to do is continue to build on the major successes that I've had. So, I've passed the most robust package of bills to help women, workers, and unions in Virginia's history. So, helping to end pregnancy discrimination, the Equal Rights Amendment, passing bills to end wage theft, where employers were misclassifying workers, denying them health care and stealing, taxes from the state. All of those type of things. It's clear that I'm fighting for equity, diversifying the teacher workforce, chief co-patron in the Crown Act. So brown and black women can no longer be fired, and men can no longer be fired for what naturally grows out of our scalp. That's right. Right. This is how we naturally appear in the world. You can't tell me it's the problem. It's something wrong with it. So, reducing black and brown girls and boys school push out, where some of our children who had braids and locks were being told you cannot come back to school until you take them out. Right? Absolutely not. We refuse to have our kids to continue to be targeted and embarrassed and shamed for their culture and adherence to their religion, because hijabs is a part of that. You can't make a child take it off. So making sure our dress codes are rooted in equity. So I will continue to build on that in Virginia. Right now, my top two priorities will be getting shots in arms and people in jobs. So building a successful post-COVID economy is my number one concern. And I do that by bringing diverse, high-paying jobs to every corner of the Commonwealth. Also, ending the digital divide. So I have to tell you, broadband access is just important today as electricity was to people decades ago.
Yes, indeed.
Right? I can't get these jobs, these manufacturing headquarters, these data centers, supply centers to Virginia without access to the internet. We can expand telemedicine, telehealth, you name it. It all goes back to access to the internet. So I will have 97% of all Virginia covered by high-speed internet by the end of my administration.
Good.
Also, access to early childhood education for every 3 and 4-year-old in Virginia, and making a full day. So that way it'll have the dual purpose of addressing childcare needs for our families who are struggling with accessibility and affordability, and then also helping to end that educational divide that starts as early as the age of 3. Yeah. So those are my top 3 priorities going in as governor.
Wow.
And those are some big issues too.
No, they really are. Because one of the things that she hit on, I just got to ask, you talk about vaccinations. We hear the nightmares going on across this country. And I'm trying to be as nice and sensitive as possible. Like, do you really see a plan like playing out where everyone is going to be vaccinated within a time frame that's going to be safe enough for us to return to some form of normalcy before the year is out?
I'm a forever optimist, so I want to say yes, right? But I have some aunties, I have some uncles who they're like, I ain't getting that vaccine.
This uncle is asking because this uncle is not signing up just yet. But go ahead.
I hear, and one of the things that I'm hearing is, listen, Jen, Tuskegee experiment, that was in the 70s, right? Mm-hmm. We remember Fannie Lou Hamer going in to get, I think it was a cyst removed and them taking out her uterus. So the whole distrust behind government, I understand, I get it. And, it is there and it is prevalent. And so I know a lot of people are, going back and forth about it. Some people in type of positions, they must, because even if it's not an issue for you, it's an issue that you can spread it to other
Mm-hmm.
people who are,
Mm-hmm.
immune compromised, or whatever may have you. But
Right.
it's a hard call. I think we have to try to, get as many people vaccinated as possible. Herd immunity, getting as close to that as possible, because that's the only way that people will start feeling safe enough to come back out and start, you know, getting to our new normal, right? Birthdays can be celebrated. People can actually go into the store to get their food. I mean, all of those things. And that'll help the industries that's hurting the most: our tourism, our entertainment, our retail, our hospitality industries. And majority of those industries are made up of Black and brown communities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all interrelated. And so that's why I am trying my best to be supportive of and trying to get as many people to take it. I think that some people are saying, well, I go get that first batch. Let me see what number 3 and number 4 look like.
I'm like, let's wait till batch 9 or 10. Let's see where we're at. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny or anything like, but yeah, count me out. I want to wait, and no disrespect. I want to see anybody get a third ear or a
Yeah,
second. No, like, yeah, I want to wait. I'm sorry. And then with this
yeah.
whole new, these 2 new batches. I mean, we going like COVID-19 to COVID-23 or whatever it is. With all of this, I want to wait. I mean, that's just me personally. But I
Hmm.
But
know at some point we got to get back to some type of normalcy.
But for the people who want to take the vaccine, right, we want to make sure that the vaccine is readily available for them,
Right.
because we know we see some challenges
Mm-hmm.
in the state of Virginia about, having a vaccine and having it available to those who would like to be in the first day, first, second, or third batch,
Mhm.
but they're having those challenges. Is that something that's state, or is that federal, getting the vaccine?
It's actually both. So, and let me be clear, I want to encourage as many people as possible to get the vaccine. And so we need to move in that direction. But it's both, in that we need the vaccines from the federal government.
Okay.
But the state, we need to be ready when we get them. And so that's why I'm really excited, and I supported the bill that came through the General Assembly that expanded the number of people who can give shots in arms.
Mm-hmm.
And then next, we need to make sure we have those systems in place where we have large places, stadiums, coliseums, wherever, where people can go. We have a constant rotation of people just coming in and getting those shots.
Okay.
So we just have to have that system that's ready. Many people are complaining about the appointments, and then they're running out and everything else, but we'll get there. So it's about the federal government being able to ascertain the vaccines, getting them to us, and then the state, it's our job to execute and implement a plan that makes sense, and make sure that we can constantly keep people on a rotation of getting shots in arms.
Right. Because there are plenty of people that want to, get the vaccine. For the majority. There's some, but there's plenty that would like to have the vaccine. We
Look,
just want to make sure that it's readily available
that's all I
if
want.
you're,
At the end of the day,
getting it.
at the end of the
That
day, for those who
is
want to do it, please do not listen to me. I'm just saying. I'm just being honest. Because I'm just being 100%. I do believe we all, and this is, again, we all will need the vaccine at some point.
Hmm.
I am just a later than most when it comes to that.
Hmm.
I
you at the back of the line
Yeah, look, I'll be happy. Look, I'll be happy to
after
hold
we
up the
don't
vaccine
fought
for you.
so hard to be in the
Yeah,
front of the line. Now
look
you
here.
want to go to the back.
Sometimes it's good to be last. Sometimes it's good to be last. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. Not a problem. But do not let me sway you people. In all honesty and all sincerity, we're laughing and having fun with it. If it is something that you choose or you desire to do, then I wholeheartedly suggest that you do it. At some point, I do believe, myself included, it's going to have to have. I'm going to have it. It's going to be
Mhm,
needed. We're just having fun with it because I am that uncle that hell
just,
no, can't count me
just
out. Just saying, right now, just right now. So thank you, Jennifer, for that, and I support that, and I hope Virginia can move forward. We, like Lisa just eloquently said, a lot of states we see in the news are we're finding batches of this vaccine that has not been delivered. I don't want to say stolen, but being hidden in sites unknown and not being delivered to those who need it. So I hope that when, like you said, when you win, you'll be able to go ahead and forge ahead with a great plan to get it out to all of our community, not just the Black and brown, all of our community and all, make it accessible for all of those who need it. So
That's
thank
Yeah.
correct.
you.
And so we have to do also a better job of speaking to the people in the community, in our community, who do have that distrust of the government. And I mean, we have to acknowledge it and recognize that people do see the number disparity and they're like, why? And it's like, well, ask questions,
Mhm.
right? And let's get in there and target it. But the people who do want access, that's why disclosure information is so important, because we need to make sure that these vaccinations are being distributed in an equitable way. And if we don't have that demographic information, we can't say that. And we know it can be done because North Carolina has like almost 100% of reporting of their demographic. So we in Virginia have to do better and mandate disclosure so we can say all of our communities are getting it as they should.
Okay, that makes sense.
Whole
That
lot of
I know
sense.
we kept you. Thank you for your time. But in order for you to actually be on the slate to become a candidate to run for governor, we have to sign a what is it, like a petition, or what do we need to do to get your name? So to let our listeners know what they need to do to get you on this ballot.
Absolutely. So there's a petition that's out there. And let's see, I believe you can go to my website, jennifercarrollfoy.com, and it'll tell you exactly where to go to get the petition. You just sign your name on there electronically and you send it back to us, and that will count. So as many people to get us on the ballot as possible. It'll be great.
Yeah.
jennifercarrollfoy.com.
All right, listeners. So look, for those of you that are living here in Virginia, you know what to do. You just heard it from Jennifer. Those listeners that may be listening from out of state, if you got aunties, uncles, mamas, cousins that live in Virginia, give them Carol Foy's information. Get them educated on what they need to do to help this woman and this sister make this historic run here in Virginia. Um, I have been educated. My eyes are now open, Jennifer. I'll be honest with you. I thank you so much for sharing, your story with us. I had a good time. I find it
I had a
very,
great time.
a great time. I had a great time. Um, so in closing, before we actually, is there anything else coming up on your schedule that you'd like to share with our listeners? That they can see you, follow you, where you're going to be at in the community, anything like that. Please take a few minutes to share that with us before we go.
Absolutely. So if you go to my website, jennifercarrollfoy.com, we have a listing of all the places we're going to be and all the events and virtual events that we're going to have. So you can come and ask me questions and have community conversations, because I want to hear from all of you. So I want to make sure that we get to meet, and that would be a great time to have it. And if you could donate to the campaign, that would be fantastic. We're running a grassroots people power campaign. So your donations matter, your voice matter. And so help us meet this historic moment, and go to jennifercarrollfoy.com and give what you can. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are quite welcome. It's been our pleasure. And please, y'all, go jennifercarolfoy.com and check her out. Get all that money, get that donation out there, help this sister, help this queen. Go ahead and go out there and make history here in Virginia and in America. This will be a huge first. So, at least before we go, do you got anything, sis?
I'm good. I just thought this was great. Thank you, Ms. Carol Foy, Jennifer Carol Foy, for joining us. It's always a pleasure. I learn something new every time, that I hear you. It's always good to get a tidbit of your candidates' inner heart and their inner journey, just to see, because you kind of got a gauge meter. We think we do, all of us.
Right.
And so it's always good when you learn something new and you hear something genuine. That's more important for me than anything else. We may not always agree on policy, but at least the genuineness for me is what drives my vote all the time, almost 100% of the time. So I do thank you for that. And I thank you for the meet and greets. I'm hosting one March 8th. So you guys, if you wanted to get on March 8th with us and get a little more intimate and do a meet and greet with Miss Carol Foy, we're going to drop the link below and come on through. I'm throwing my support behind Jennifer Carroll Foy. And you just got endorsed, girl.
Well, I will say, generally, I try to stay in between. You've done a great job of giving me something to think about. And I will say, two mics up is happy to have you. You are always welcome here as a guest, as our next governor. I'm not here. People don't listen to me. Don't go out and vote because Dame said so. Go out and vote because you are picking the best candidate that's doing the most for you and your community. And if you walk away with what I just said, I think you heard that here today. So, Jennifer, continue success. If there's anything that we can do for you, please let us know. Anytime you want to come back, please reach out. Let us know. We'd be happy to have you on. And, just continue success. We'll be watching you, uh, not from afar, but from close up, and we will continue to do what we can to support you in the future.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So, listeners, stay tuned. We are going to be coming again later on this week with a live. We're going to, be bringing something a little different. Lisa and I have been arguing and fighting back and forth behind the scenes. But I think we always talk about the men, and Lisa brought up a good point. So you guys stay tuned for this next live coming up. You'll be seeing a few more drops and commercials, but stay tuned. As always, you can follow Two Mics Up online at www.twomicsup.com. You can follow us across social media, IG, Facebook, and Twitter at Two Mics Up. And like we always do at this time, stay safe, stay blessed. Mics out.
Mike's out.